Morning, Ralph.
Morning, Sam.
Welcome to the MSMR podcast. My name is Michael Beck. I am here with our motley crew, Paul Molinari, Chad Horn, and our very special guest, Mr. Jeremy Julian. Jeremy, welcome to the show. It's been an interesting time getting our stream set up, but I love the fact that you were our first show that we were on. And so now we've kind of gone full circle. Anyways, but welcome to the podcast.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. Hopefully I can make you guys proud, because it's always interesting sitting on this side of the mic. Normally I'm the one asking questions. Instead, I get to listen to the motley crew ask me questions today.
Yeah, as you started up, you said the words, I don't know if that was true. You go, I'm nervous. I've done 250 of these things and I'm nervous on this one. And I don't know if that's true, but I'm honored if you are.
I love it. Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. So Paulie, let's kick things off.
Well, first, why don't we start off with Jeremy? Maybe you can introduce. Everybody in the industry already knows who you are, but perhaps you can introduce yourself to some of the listeners that might not know who you are and who you work for.
Oh, thanks for that, and I hope that it's a good reason why people know who I am, and it's not because I did somebody some harm in the past somewhere. But in general, Jeremy Julian, Chief Revenue Officer for Custom Business Solutions. Celebrating my 29th year in the restaurant and tech industry. And the business has been around a little over 30 years now. We're celebrating our 30th year. I get the privilege of working with some clients in and around the industry. And if I'm truthful, going back to my first job, I worked at the center hut at the softball fields when my parents were playing adult softball when I was 12, selling hot dogs. So I've been in food service or food service tech my entire life. So,
wow.
He's got ketchup in his veins.
Seriously, you must. 30 years. That's, some might even say that I can't even recall, but you guys, what did you guys invent the point of sale system at 30 years? That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, it was our very first install was an old CRT screen that was 14 inches. It was monochrome. We had to run cables into the data room, and we're soldering wires. I burned the crap out of my fingers when I was 18, a bunch, and then some real professionals came in and fixed my work, and they still give me a hard time about it today.
That's wild. You've probably seen it all in this space. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was, you have custom point of sale solutions versus, off the shelf systems. So, as the head of a company offering custom restaurant point of sale software, can you describe sort of the pros and cons of both approaches for restaurants that are thinking about going custom versus something that's more generic and off the shelf?
Yeah, so at times, and we joke about it internal to the business, there's times the name of the business I get the privilege to work for is Custom Business Solutions. And every once in a while, I want to say, I wish it was renamed Out of the Box Business Solutions, because it would probably make things easier. But at the end of the day, we realize that while restaurants are serving guests, everyone has a different spin on the way that they want to serve their guests and create a guest experience. And so we believe that technology should be an enabler to help them do those things. And so that requires different levels of integration that requires you to innovate and to really understand where they're trying to go and what they're trying to get done. And that doesn't work out of the box. And so I grew up in the industry with a product called PosiTouch. It was based out of Rhode Island, and they were really customer centric. They wanted to understand what the customer needed and then build the application to do that. And so trained from a very young age, when we started with Northstar, which is our go-to-market product now, we have taken that same philosophy that we're not going to dictate to a restaurant how they need to operate. We're going to adapt technology to solve their problems.
So when you talk about customization, is that more, sometimes I think folks, when they think about point of sale or back office or, large sort of enterprise grade software, is it truly customization or is it configuration? And what's the difference between both things?
I think that's a tough question to answer. And I think as our product has become more and more mature, we've gotten the capability to do different, what we would call configurations, which are out of the box, but allow you to create the user experience the way that you want or need to. years ago when we first started, it had to be custom because you had to build it. A customer would ask for it and you didn't know how they did tip. If I told you that tip pooling, we've talked with at least 10 different ways to do tip pooling, and the ways that people will design a tip pool. Everybody might say, well, it's a tip pool. The bartenders get this and the busters get this. But at the end of the day, different people do different things based on where they are geographically, what resonates with their customers, what resonates with their staff members. And so you might say you have tip pooling. And so when you check off the box on an RFI or an RFP, do I have tip pooling? You say yes. But then when you get into the specific customer's needs, they go, yes, I understand that you say you have tip pooling, but we need tip pooling to only do hard alcohol drinks as a calculation. And we don't care about beer and wine because that's coming from a different bar. And you're like, I've never had somebody that says it that way for a bartender. And now you've got to go create a custom configuration that says pick only these categories for this tip pool. So
There's
hopefully
probably
that answers your question,
regulatory
Paul.
factor there too that comes into play, right? Like when new regulations come up on like California, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, labor, that's a big one. I mean, labor and taxation are two of the big ones, and as regulators continue to try and figure out how to make sure that they're collecting what it is that they need to. Taxes is a big one. Different states will have different municipalities. And so it's like, okay, how do we deal with that? We did an installation in Puerto Rico years ago, and Puerto Rico has a national lottery. The national lottery prints a lottery ticket number on every single retail receipt in the country. And then every night they have a national lotto that they come on the television and somebody wins. Why did the government do that? They did that to force retailers to ring up the sales so they get their tax calculations. Is that customization or is that configuration?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when you choose to do business with those people, you have to support the local municipality. And now that ends up being a custom function that you now can modify, because in Quebec, in Canada, they have a fiscal receipt printer that does something very similar so that they can collect taxes.
Yeah.
Then you go to Mexico and they've got a different way that they're doing that. And so I think it takes many different forms, Paul, and I think it just kind of depends on where are the customers coming from, what type of markets are you serving. Quick serve does things differently than fast casual. Fast casual does things differently than than a full service environment.
Yeah.
So because of that, you can oftentimes tweak a feature that you built for one industry or one portion of the industry to allow it to hit the needs of another
one
brand
of the things
that wants it different.
That's a great answer, and that I appreciate that. Having worked at an enterprise class restaurant tech company like Crunch Time for about 9 years, it was crazy how we would develop our roadmap. And I'm always interested to learn more how companies like Northstar would approach, solving these large problems, like the guys just alluded to a couple of minutes ago. What's going on in California, right? How do you pick what's the next thing that you need to work on to get the most bang for your buck for as many customers as possible?
Great question.
It ends up being a twofold problem. We have what are called sprints, standard traditional product roadmap methodology, and we do planning sessions, and we'll decide these are what are going to go into this next feature, and we weigh the needs of the existing client base as well as the potential new client base to identify what goes into those versions. If the existing client base has got a new law in New York City that they need to deal with, so, recycling, can law that needs to add 5 cents worth to every single item that has this can on it, we have to put that in because it's a regulatory thing, and we'll do a release mid-cycle for that. And then we look at, okay, what is the revenue target for existing customers or existing, potential customers? And we go, okay, we need this. And we back into it based on what their roadmap is, going back to that, having a very deep relationship with our customers, because most customers also have a need. We're working with a client right now that their contract with a competitor ends in December. So they are looking to roll out in January. We need to make sure that we meet their requirements by January in order for them to roll out, or they have to continue to roll with that existing product versus rolling back. And so we build the needs in, we prototype it, we use a tool called Figma that does all the UI UX. We send the Figma out to them, they review it, they say, yes, this is great. Then we code to it, and they're part of the development cycles and sit and get those pre-release versions as time goes on.
That's wild. That's cool.
Hey, I had a thought too. When we're talking about the custom side of CBS, it's easy to fall, especially when it says custom business solutions, but it's not solutions always. It's not always software, right? Like you're building custom environments for people. You're talking about hardware, software, vendors, partners, like maybe dip into a little bit of that part of it. Cause I think I don't want people to miss the boat and think you're just the software part. There's more to CBS than that.
Yeah, I spend probably 10% of my time out traveling. It's where I met Chad. Michael, you and I run into each other at different places where I'm out meeting with clients. So over the last 4 weeks, I've had no less than 10 client appointments where I ask them, what keeps you up at night? What are the problems you're trying to solve within your business? Help me understand what it is that you're looking to deal with. And then I go back to our business and I go, okay, this is a problem they have. Is this something we can solve? Or is this something that we need to go find a partner to go solve that problem for them? An example, as things have become a bigger portion of people's business going outside the four walls with third-party delivery and with takeout and online ordering, how do we make sure that the food quality meets the standards of the brand? And making sure that no ketchup got on that burger or no peanuts got into that pad thai because we've got a peanut allergy. So we're starting to look at different ways that we can solve that. Mm-hmm. Is it the label printers that go on that? Is it the cameras that are watching those orders? Is it a checklist system? And so I'm talking to different vendors in the space. And then the next question, again, back to Restaurant Magic where you were at, Michael, and Crunch Time, what's your guys' partner strategy? If I figure out that Restaurant Magic happens to have that solution, what's their partner strategy? And then we build a business relationship that's either we're white labeling it or we're referring them into that. So I spend 10% of my time out at trade shows discovering, and probably 25% of my time talking to existing customers and saying, help me understand what your struggles are so that I can come back with problem solving solutions for you that aren't necessarily just something that we sell. I might refer them in. I might white label it. It could be any number of different ways that we go to market to help them out.
God, I mean, that seems like such an organic part of, one of our people over here on this is Chad. Like Chad lives and breathes partnerships, And actually, how did you guys meet? Just out of curiosity, because you said you knew him first before we got on this call, right?
Remember that?
How do you know Chad?
Goes way back.
I'm gonna say we may have had a higher BAC than we would have wanted to recognize at the time, but Chad coming from the East Coast had partnered with PosiTouch, and so I met him at a PosiTouch conference because he was working at an organization in kind of the Boston, Rhode Island market that had partnered with PosiTouch, and he showed up to the partner conference, and every year I would go to the PosiTouch partner conference, and Chad and I may or may not have had a couple of adult beverages together.
I vaguely remember this, Jeremy. Yeah.
I am so sad we didn't do any of this back in the day.
Yeah, well, we all used to misbehave a little bit more than we do now. So
that's the other thing, though. I think we need to include adult beverages inside of these podcasts. I mean, we are all adults here. It's fine. You've been doing these things on Fridays. Okay.
Right. A little Friday aperitif wouldn't be bad.
That's funny.
But think about that, like Chad. The way we look at partnerships and the way that Jeremy does things, and we're kind of teeing you up here to really let's talk about how what your role is and the importance of partnerships in this world, and kind of how that function supports it, both from you and Jeremy, right?
Yeah, I mean,
we're always better together in most cases.
I'll start this, and Jeremy, I'm curious what your number is, right? But when I was, working with restaurant brands on the POS side, I saw the average client working with 7 or 8 integrated partners, and I'll just say integrated because there's more than that, obviously, that they contend with. And so these are all things that have to, pass data to and from and be a part of the operation in synchronicity with one another. That's a big to do, right? And so how does that impact your world?
We're in double digits. So our average client has 12 different integration touch points into the point of sale.
Okay.
And so with that, how do they talk to each other?
Right.
And again, I was just on a prospect call earlier this week, and they have a point of sale solution, and they have an online ordering solution, and they have a digital menu board solution. And all of them are disconnected. In Northstar, we've got them all seamless. So when I change it in the point of sale, it changes it on online ordering, it changes it on third-party delivery, it also changes it on the digital menu boards. How much effort and time? He said, I spent 7 hours we just did a menu rollout. I spent 7 hours fixing my digital menu board somewhere at one of the stores. It took almost an entire day to do that. And so we look to try and build those better mousetraps to solve one of the 3 customers that we solve for. And we identify 3 different users of our product. There's the one that uses it in the store. Then there's the corporate headquarters that uses the data and manages it, manipulates it, whether that's IT, finance, corporate office, operations. And then the third is the data integrators, DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, online ordering, loyalty solutions, back office solutions like you guys used to work for. So we try and solve when we're building out products for all three customers, understanding that the user at the front end that has to serve the guest, it has to be easy, it has to be seamless, you need to make his life better. Then at the corporate headquarters, we got to make the IT guys' life easier. We got to make finance's life easier. We got to make purchasing and supply chain's life easier. And then ultimately, we've got to be easy to play well with in the sandbox, because if we don't play well in the sandbox, ultimately those people often have as much influence with marketing or somebody else in the brand than we do.
Yeah, Jeremy, let's talk about one of the very, very specific drivers of technology adoption these days, and that's the increased costs that restaurants are facing. Supply chain, labor, and so it's like, I got to be more efficient, right? I got to streamline operations.
I love that.
And the POS plays a massive role in helping an operator do that. Where do you start? Right? If someone says, "Hey, this is something I'm trying to solve," where do you stack rank priorities of things they look at to achieve what they essentially need to for survival?
I educate our team often on we're either going to help increase efficiency to drive top line revenue, or we're going to work on decreasing their costs within the business. And so, very real life example of a recent customer, very successful barbecue chain here in Dallas. We walked in, and the queue, because it was a cafeteria style line, and they do very, very massive volume. The store that cafeteria style, they get the barbecue at the front, and then they walk through the cafeteria style line, and then they go to the end and pay. They had a huge sticking point at the payment area. And we said, how do we solve their payment pain?
Yeah.
And they're now double digits increase in sales because there's no longer a queue, so they can get through the lines faster. They've had an 11% increase since they put in Northstar into the Hard 8 barbecue running our solution.
I was hoping it was Hard 8. I was so hoping you're going to say
It's
Hard 8.
Hard 8. We'll put a link in the show description.
Oh my God, it is amazing.
I think I've heard of this one too. This is like one of those famous Texas barbecue places.
It's an institution. Yeah,
it is.
I get it.
It is, and the volume is crazy. But how do we do that, Chad? I walk with the sales rep through the property, and we're like, okay, where are their pain points? Very real life example, somebody that I know for sure, Chad. Gene Harrison and I, this is many, many years ago. We were in Southern California, Wahoo's Fish Tacos, very successful fish taco brand. We sat in there for 2 full lunches with a baseball clicker where we watched how many people left the door. And then we went to the customer and said, what's your average check? $12 a person. We said, just yesterday, you lost 22 guests at $12 a person because you couldn't ring through their sales fast enough. The next day, it was 18 customers. So we said 40 customers in 2 days, you missed out on over $400 in sales. If I could go add $400 in sales to this week's sales, what would that do for you? So now we've increased revenue. So those are options to add increased revenue.
Absolutely.
On the flip side, there's the decrease in cost. You guys have all been into restaurants where you've got what we call tablet hell. So what is the tablet hell? It's when I'm trying to do third-party delivery. Again, Chad, I know in your history, you work for an order delivery aggregator product that would go into the point of sale. How do we get one of those players to integrate those orders so I don't have a human sitting there going? And for those on video that are those on audio only, I'm mimicking let me grab it on the tablet. It's beeping at me. I'm trying to serve a guest and get it straight into the point of sale. And so those are ways that we choose to do that. But it only works if you really understand what their problems are and identify what their problems are and help them see a future that is bigger and better than what their current circumstances are. If you go in and you're just like everybody else, you're going to lose every time. But if you truly understand what the customers need and want and get to that level of Hard 8, where it's like, okay, if we could increase sales by 8% was what our estimate was. Ultimately, we hit 11% increase in sales for them. What would that do for their business? That's huge. That pays for the point of sale every single month at a place that's that busy.
Yeah, and awesome. Just going back to what you were talking about earlier with custom, right? I mean, this is an opportunity for feedback. Custom it means touch, right? So yes. you have to be dialed in with the customer. You have to understand what their what truly what their pain points are, right? And the only way you're going to get there is with discovery and conversations and being there and boots on the ground.
Yep. Without naming names, would you say that it's a true statement that, let's say, the big box PayFac POS companies aren't going to deliver that kind of experience. It's more off the shelf. You get it and solve your own problem with it. Do you think that's a key differentiator for CBS?
We actually just started a campaign, and anybody that's following the CBS page on LinkedIn will see it most recently, of playing off of kind of the freedom to have it your way, kind of Burger King-esque marketing campaign.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, we recognize that we're not here to dictate technology. We're not here to dictate how. We can challenge you to help you approach that, but you're not going to get it from the likes of publicly traded companies like Shift4 and Toast and Square. And again, they serve a fantastic market that wants to be told what to do and wants to be told this is the way you do it, and you get you can get any color you want as long as it's black, the old Henry Ford quote. That's kind of the way they do it. That's not us.
Yeah.
No,
That's
that's what they do. That's what they're good at, right? That's how they scale and get the numbers that they have.
And they go fast that way.
And they go fast.
Yep.
But sometimes speed kills. So, Michael, why don't just doing a time check here, and we know that
we got another minute. I was thinking Chad was going to round the bend with a couple more things.
I mean, I gotta ask about data, right? So what you shared, Jeremy, is like you're using observational data. You're going into these places and seeing things that maybe the operator's too close to see. That's just so common sense, and I don't think there's any substitute for that. And there's a lot of conversation in our industry, like what about the other data? The data in the POS now is across multiple locations for a multi-unit. And they need to digest all of that data in an impactful way. AI is kind of added fuel to this fire where it's like, now I got more data or different ways of using data. What's your approach to like helping operators practically simply use the data, powerful data that they have to have an impact?
Again, we also philosophically believe that the customer owns the data. It's their data to exploit, to do their bidding with. It's not our job to hold their data hostage for them not to be able to use that. And so, again, we believe in access to the data. We publish an open API. They can get to the data. We integrate with over 100 platforms within our solutions, actually close to 150 at this point. And so if they want to put it into their own data cube, no problem. If they want to go attach to a Crunch Time or a Restaurant 365 or a Data Central or any of the tools that are out there, we believe that that is an important part of giving them freedom of choice. And we also enhance things from the data that we have. So one of our most recent releases that we've got in beta tested some customers, going back to third-party delivery and things coming out of takeout, is we use the data that we have about when the order got into the kitchen and when the order got out of the kitchen, and are giving, based on the actual basket, an estimate on when that food is going to get ready. So if I have a well-done New York strip and a miso salmon and a Caesar salad, the average cook time on that is going to be 12 minutes. The ideal should have been, 11 and a half minutes, but from the store in Boston at the downtown store, it actually is trending on a Wednesday afternoon at 13 and a half minutes. So how do I tell the guest it's 13 and a half minutes to within 30 seconds? And so we're using some of our data to suggest some operational improvements for those brands.
What do you call that category of intelligence, Jeremy?
It's predictive analytics.
Okay.
Predictive analytics, whether it's on the labor side, predictive analytics on kitchen automation, predictive analytics on the way that they're going about. But again, guest satisfaction, going back to customer number one, ensuring that the guest gets the food when they need to get it based on that shift, that store, and how fast that kitchen operates. Because the store in downtown Boston for Cheesecake Factory operates differently than the store in the suburbs in Boston. It just does. You can say what you want, but depending upon who's on the line and the cooks and the way that the line is run and the order flow, it may be 2 minutes worth of a difference, which could make the difference on whether the guest orders or not.
Yeah. Very
Fantastic. We're here with Jeremy Julian, the CRO of Custom Business Solutions, and also the restaurant technology guy of the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to come back to
the godfather, really the godfather of restaurant technology podcast.
I'm going to call him the podfather.
The podfather. Don't tell my kids, because they will totally rip on me. Quite frankly, half the time they sit on the other side of the door in my home office and laugh at me when I'm recording podcasts.
I think I sat outside the door with them and ripped on you anyways. But no, I'm just kidding. You know what? I'm going to share something personal about the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. And I shared this with you the other day, Jeremy, but the guys here don't know. So my wife, Pam, is thinking about getting into the business, right? And specifically, as we're growing, she may come on board with us, right? And so to learn the lingo and the world that we operate in, I said, why don't you listen to the restaurant technology guys? He has a lot of different people on the show. They talk a lot about a different subject. Jeremy, offers up a lot of good information. So I just told her, I didn't know she was following through with it. Now she's been listening religiously. And the other day I'm sitting in my living room, I'm watching TV, and I hear your voice coming down the hall like you're in my house. And I'm like, how is that possible? Is Jeremy Julian here? No, my wife is listening to you. And so it's funny, and then the other, you're here a couple of weeks ago. She's like, oh my God, Jeremy's here. I'm like, I see him on the internet. I'm like, he's our friend.
Yeah. Well, something super cringeworthy. I was walking out and we have a pool in our backyard and my daughter had her girlfriends over for swim time. And they had the podcast running on the outdoor speakers when I came outside with her and all of her girlfriends. So let me just tell you how embarrassing that was to walk outside to go get in the garage to hear my voice in my backyard. And it's my daughter, and they like to make memes of me out in my teenage daughter. So there's that.
Does it almost feel like you wish your family didn't know you did this part about your life, just to save yourself?
Honestly, Beck, and this is super heartfelt, but at the end of the day, this industry has given me so much, and it's the small things that I can do to help others to succeed that I realize that there's no other way I can do that other than producing something that is going to go well beyond me. When I get calls from people in Indonesia and from Europe and Africa saying that they listened to the show and learned and are now more successful because of it, it makes me happy that I got over the cringeworthiness of listening to my own voice and watching my own face on a YouTube show and getting it out there. And I mean, we're well over 350,000 downloads of the show at this point, which is really, really cool.
That is absolutely awesome. That is awesome. And in being in the position, where you're helping people and you're giving a platform and a voice, right? To, like, for us, when we started out, we literally just started, and you were nice enough to invite us on the show. And the impact it had for us was absolutely massive.
Yeah.
We sustained ourselves for several months, and even till today on business, we earned because of that platform and voice.
And believe me, you think you cringe. I can't even watch it. It was the first podcast we ever did, and I was like, holy geez, my God.
Yeah, we're not gonna watch that. And so, but just the same. And even to the audience listening right now, if you're thinking about getting on a podcast and talking and not knowing if you're going to do great, we were horrible. Hands down,
we're like two steps above that.
Yeah,
Michael, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back.
We spoke, right? Outside of being mute and outside of being mute. Yeah. But anyway, but with that in mind, right? The world's changing, right? And with technology that's coming out, like, I think some of the things to talk about are like, what about customers change behaviors? POS is the nerve center of every business, and it's usually the interaction point of every customer and every transaction. How do you see, one, the technology evolving, and also how do you see the customer evolving in their expectations of those technologies? Things like tipping, right?
I think the Amazon effect is impacting all areas of retail. Everybody wants a customized experience based on what they want and what they need for the day. And so depending upon who you are and how you want to interact with the brand, you guys all know that I've got, a large number of children. And so if I'm traveling for business, it's a different conversation than when I'm meeting out with my wife on a date, than when I'm driving home from baseball practice and I need to pick up a meal. And because of that, I want to be able to interact with the brand that I want to be able to interact with. Right. And it needs to be seamless to me. We all could go on right now and order something and have it delivered to our house within an hour for something we wanted. Every one of us. And if restaurants and technology is not an enablement to that and is a hindrance to that, you are losing to your competitor that is doing that. And so our job is to constantly reduce the friction for the guest and to create a customized experience. I tell a very true story. I was on a baseball recruiting visit with my son. We were out of town. He hadn't brought his laptop and found out that he forgot to turn in an assignment that he had completed. So he says, "Hey, Dad, can I borrow your laptop? I need to log into Google Classroom and I need to be able to submit my class project." No problem. So he logs out of my Gmail account and logs into his Gmail account on the Chrome browser. And he handed me the laptop back, and it was like foreign. I was like, "What did you do to my computer?" Because it changed the icons, it changed because it changes everything, because it's customized to what your login is. Yeah. All of us in the restaurant world want the Cheers effect. How do we do that digitally? how do we do that digitally in an online, offline commerce way, in a way that's not creepy, that's not AI, that's not, people. I mean, we just had a customer I was just visiting last week in California that was using AI to identify a guest. And Paul might walk up to the kiosk and says, "Hey, Paul, it looks like you're back. Would you like the fish tacos again?" Not Wahoo's, but and that's a little much.
Did
but
that customer opt in for that?
Yeah, it is.
The customer didn't. And so ultimately they got sued. They were in California.
Yeah.
They're turning it off. And everybody, though, if you guys walked up to the cashier and you're at that place every Taco Tuesday and the cashier said, "Hey, Michael, I know you really like the fish tacos," you'd be okay with it.
Right.
And so it's figuring out how do you blend that customization and an online offline transaction with the ability to not seem creepy and have people, because your immediate reaction was, they're invading my privacy.
Yeah.
But if they knew who you were and they recognized you through their own brain, you'd be okay with it. And so it's figuring out how to balance that, I think, is some of the things that we're looking to get to within our space.
And be able to change it in a year when sentiment changes around those things.
Yes, because in Europe, it's definitely different than it is in the US, but everybody likes the Cheers effect. I can tell you, I go to Vinny's Italian restaurant in town where I live because Vinny knows my kids and lets my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, go back behind the counter and ring up our transaction when she's there. Why do I go to Vinny's? Because Vinny knows me, right?
Yeah.
You guys all have those kind of experiences, so we all know that that's part of the hospitality business.
Yeah,
but how do you do that at
Your
scale?
name's on the screen, right?
Yeah. I mean, but I think that's one of the things that we've got to figure out. How do we blend that on the front of the house side? Chad, you talked about cost being a huge factor, and it continues to be a problem. Technology for technology's sake is worthless. Technology that solves real business challenges or enhances guest experience is the only thing you should be investing your time in.
Yeah. There's a cliche about, what is it? A tech project without ops buy-in is doomed to fail.
Yep. Absolutely.
Use it, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. What do you think about, and so on that side, but what do you think about like the concept of POS in the pocket? We've been talking to a lot of companies that are kind of playing with the notion that there is no device. It's all already, you want to call it edge computing, or it's on the mobile devices that people are walking in the door. Do you think that's a place that's something that's coming, or how do you see the future?
So I will tell you philosophically. So if you were to go back on the archives back to probably 2018 on the Restaurant Tech Guys podcast, I actually talk about this. I think the future of dining out is going to be bring your own device and create your own experience. Northstar does that. I was just talking to somebody prior to. Okay. You can put a QR code at the table, open up a check on your own, split it between people. And so, yes, and I think you also, my wife and I just celebrated 20 years of marriage. We went out to a fine dining dinner. If I had to ring up my $40 or my $60 ribeye, I'd be pissed, right? When I'm going for, when I go to a really high end, and which again, go to retail, go to grocery, they've got self-checkout, and then they've got kind of the attended checkout. And then you've got bougie ass specialty retailers that are bringing your grass-fed beef to your house and putting it in your refrigerator for you. And so
it's about know your audience. Right.
Yes. Yeah. And I think different people are going to experience the brand in different ways. And so depending upon if I'm there hanging out with you guys having a drink after a softball game, different conversation. I want to be able to control my own pace, ring up my beer in my own pocket. But if I'm going out for a special occasion, don't make me do the work. Also, even in that, talk about loyalty. Loyalty is a big thing that everybody's talking about, loyalty and CDP. Mm-hmm. Okay. How do I attach to the check? When I'm there by myself at Luna Grill and I'm ringing up Mediterranean food, no big deal with my kids to put in my phone number and get my $5 off and have the cashier have that experience. If I'm putting it on an expense account, I don't want that awkward, hey, you're here all the time for business meals. Do you want to take your $50 off the check? Because that's awkward when they come up to the table and do that to you. And so depending upon how your guest experience is, you have to define your brand based on how they're engaging with it at that time and that date. And technology needs to be an enabler to allow both in the same instance, in my opinion.
Love it. Love the passion. And it goes back to understanding who you're catering to. Who is your customer, and what are their wants and needs, and satisfying them that way. And I think that because, and just going back to sort of like, the one size fits all for some of the larger scaled POS solutions, you're never going to get that. You're never going to get that sort of customization. You're never going to get that understanding of your audience without boots on the ground and a high touch customer experience. I'd like to talk just for a second about, as we're coming up on time here. There's a part of our program that we like to call "Hate to Tell You, But," and it's an opportunity. It's a little game that we like to play where you get to fix a misconception. It's kind of like myth busting in a way, right? So, in your space, Jeremy, what is something you come across, but you'd love to tell people, hate to tell you, but, and then go.
We just released an article on this a week or two ago that free POS isn't free. And I think there's a lot of perception out there that I've got a really free or a really inexpensive POS, and oftentimes those free POS, when you look at total cost of ownership over a 5-year period, are the most expensive POS. It's just the way that they go about building that out is a critical piece. So I guess that's probably the biggest one. The biggest misconception that we get is it's so cheap, so and so. And again, it's so cheap. But at the end of the day, when you really look under the covers, it's not nearly as inexpensive as they make it seem.
What about POS and payments? I mean, if you're a POS, do you have to be in the payments game? I mean, how does that work?
Most everybody is. And unfortunately, where there's mystery, there's margin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but where there's mystery, there's margin. Yeah. And there's mystery in the payments game. And so people use it to create an existing margin stack or increase a margin stack on that. And so many people have done it very well. We've talked about a few. Clover, Toast, Square have done it really, really well, where they attach payments and they make the bulk of their revenue. You can read it on their publicly traded, stock report. So it's not a mystery. They make the bulk of their revenue and they make the bulk of their profit based on payments. How do they do that? Every single time you swipe a credit card, the restaurant is paying. And the more rewards you get on that credit card, the more the restaurant pays. And with that, because your Chase Premier blah, 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 blah card that's going to send you to Tahiti next month, that costs the restaurant more than your Wells Fargo debit card. And because of that, it ends up being expensive for the restaurant. And the people that are tied into payments as their primary source of revenue, it ends up being one of their bigger margin stacks that they end up monetizing. And that's where they make the majority of their money.
Right. So it's almost becomes, in some ways, if you're predominantly payments based as a POS provider, then you seem to be selling real cheap on your hardware costs and everything else, right? Because you're making it all back on payments.
Because you're making it all back on payments. The latest, and again, I'm picking on Toast just because they're the biggest and they took a lot of money. And you know what? I'm not picking on Toast, but it's publicly traded information, so it's not like I'm sharing any trade secrets. I read through their latest earnings statements, and they pretty much say that they're making their hardware margin back on a 36-month agreement in 12 months. So they're giving away free hardware and they're making it back over a 12-month period on a 36-month agreement. So months 13 through 36, they're making really, really good margin on those, on that customer. And again, not picking on them. They've been really, really bright about the way that they've gone about it. And where there's mystery, there's margin. People can't understand their credit card statements from Toast. They can't even get them. They can't figure out what they're paying for, when, and how. It's become really, really challenging for people to do that. And it's not a whole lot different than cell phone bills or deregulated states where energy costs are a certain way, or cell phones are a certain way, or gas is a certain way. It's hard to figure it out. And you go, I don't know. It's just the way it is. This is a cost of what I have to do. And so one of the things I guess I would give your audience is oftentimes we'll educate our customers to pick up their total effective rate. Pick up your total sales and divide it by the cost it costs you to process. And if you're anywhere 3% or higher, you need to be figuring something else out. You're paying more than you should be in the restaurant industry. Chad's shaking his head because he was in this industry at one point. But if you're paying 3% or higher, then likely you're getting juice through the payment side. And I've seen people that have an effective rate of 4 and 5 and 6% of their sales going just to credit cards, which clearly is much more expensive than it needs to be.
Yeah,
anyone with familiarity with payments sees egregious things going on.
Yes. Yeah. So, and phantom fees, and Congress is trying to fix all of that, but it's going to take a really long time, and the lobby is very strong in Washington to not let that happen.
It just doesn't feel like it's very hospitable, does it? When you get a check and all of a sudden you have all of these line items on there, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I didn't sign up for this.
Right? I mean, it's predatory. If we think about the entrepreneur that's trying to make their business grow, and then they're being given the option of buy now, pay later, the promise is paying a lot later. right? That's really what it is. They're making a deal that in hindsight might not be that sweet.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think we're about here at time. Is there anything else that we didn't cover during this part, or I think we're about ready to wrap here.
Jeremy, man, listen, it was awesome having you on. I mean, my goodness, like I said, we've got the pod father, our second podcast. How lucky are we?
Well, I apologize. Sometimes I get on my soapbox from time to time and start going a little bit off the reservation. So hopefully it wasn't too bad.
Well, we don't have to pull content out of you, right? You're willing, and so you're a fantastic guest. And honestly, I'm gonna say it out loud for everybody. You've been a fantastic friend and mentor to me as a peer. The Julian family has meant a lot to me over the years, and I'm just such a fan of everything the people at CBS are doing. And so, as we wrap this up, what did we learn today? That CBS provides more than just software. Right, you provide solutions by merit of partnership and hardware and all these things to bring it together. I think there's a lot more that people don't know about CBS that they'd be surprised that they found out actually who you do business with across the board. It's amazing. Cruise ships, grocery, fine dining.
The Norwegian Joy. This shirt happens to be the Norwegian Joy.
I thought you were going to roll up and show me a
No.
sleeve.
This is one of our. No tattoos for me. Okay. No tattoo. The Norwegian Joy. We're working with Norwegian Cruise Lines. We work with some of the largest brands in the country. Yeah. We've got a grocery solution for restaurants instead of grocery stores.
Yeah.
We've got we work on multiple operating systems, existing hardware stacks. We're trying to solve problems for restaurants, and again. This restaurant industry has given me and my family a fantastic career and an opportunity to engage with some people that I never would have been able to meet otherwise. And so I'm grateful for not only the industry, but hopefully I give back something to it that helps make the world a better place.
Doing that, right? I mean, so, the other things we learned here is that, the restaurant technology, guys, isn't something for you just to talk on air with people. You're bringing people along for a journey and giving them a voice, right? And when you talk about how you treat your customer, the thing I learned that I didn't even know, and I'd worked with you, is that you and Gene sat in that room and took down notes about how to actually make this profitable, and you solved the problem before you ever even talked to the brand and say, here, listen, here's evidence of how we can help you. That's amazing.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, and then another learning, POS is not free. And I will close out with the Godfather or the Podfather of Soul. Thank you so much. I think it's been a fantastic show. And then, Jeremy, if people want to find you, where will they find you? I know they're CBS Northstar.com. There's a Restaurant Technology Guys, but what are the ways will they find you? Are there shows coming up? Tell us a little bit about that as we wrap up.
Yeah, I'm super active on LinkedIn. So I would say if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, anybody that's in the industry, you want to be on the show, if you go to restauranttechnologyguys.com, you can fill out an interest form. We can figure out if it makes sense for that. I'm going to the RSPA show in Las Vegas in about 4 weeks, which is late July. I'm sure there'll be some production time in here. So late July, the RSPA Retail Now show is in late July. That's for retail solution providers that serve restaurant vertical, retail vertical, and grocery vertical. So it's people that do what I do and sell into that space. So it's a bunch of peers. We go to that show. Michael, I know I took you to one.
Great speakers.
Fantastic learning opportunity. I'll be at FS Tech this year in Dallas, Texas, or in Grapevine, Texas at the Grapevine Mills. And then I'll be at the ScanSource Conference, which is a distributor conference in Greenville, South Carolina in August. So those are my next 3 months worth of trade shows outside of customer events that I know I'll be at. Online, though, LinkedIn's probably the best way. I'll stay connected there, super active there, restauranttechnologyguys.com, cbsnorthstar.com.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeremy. This is a great show. And by the way, guys, MSMR episode 2, that's a wrap.
Woo! Take care.